Hi everybody, Joey here again and welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to make do-it-yourself fish food. Now the reason of what prompted this video was very simple. When I was writing my new book, I included do-it-yourself fish food. And when writing it, I realized that there's so much I never talked about on video. Now while I won't be able to cover it all in one video, I will certainly be giving you as much information as I can. Now the information that I'm going to be providing in this video is actually what I have been using to feed my fish exclusively for the last 2 years. For example, I've been feeding this to all of my discus, including adults, breeding pairs, and fry, as well as every size in between. Now given the fact that I believe in it so much, I thought it was necessary to reveal exactly how I do it. Now I will break this video down into 5 parts. Understanding what fish need in their diets and how they use it, possible ingredients and their values, color enhancers, how to actually make the food, and how much and how often to feed it. So let's get started. Now before considering making your own food, the most important factor to consider is to understand what fish require and what to find the requirements in. So let's keep this simple. A complete diet for your fish should consist of protein, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and minerals. Now protein can be considered the building blocks of growth. Protein is most often covered in fish food by using meat of or flesh of other animals. Now how much protein a fish needs can really be broken down to what type of fish it is. Now to keep things simple and to create a rule of thumb, we can break them into 3 classes: herbivorous, omnivorous, and carnivorous fish. Now, herbivorous fish require a lot more plant protein than animal protein. So what I like to do is 1 part meat to 1.5 parts vegetables. Omnivorous fish are kind of in between herbivores and carnivores, meaning that they basically eat just about anything. However, I like to do them with 2 parts meat and 1 part veggies. Now, when it comes to carnivorous fish, obviously, they need a lot more animal protein in their diet, so I like to use 3 parts meat and 1 part vegetables. Now, since we can't actually analyze the fish food in a lab-type setting, we will use those percentages and ratios as a general rule of thumb to go by. Of course, you can manipulate and change them as you seem fit. Now, carbohydrates typically come in the form of starches and sugars, and these are an inexpensive source of energy for fish diets. Although it is not necessarily needed due to fish being able to extract and use energy from other ingredients. It still needs to be mentioned. Fats are actually high energy nutrients that can be used in place of protein when looking for an energy source by the fish. Fats actually produce twice the amount of energy as proteins and carbohydrates. Now remember being told to eat your vegetables? The reason being is simple. They are packed full of vitamins. Now vitamins are organic compounds necessary in the diet for normal fish growth and health. They must be supplied in the diet. Minerals are inorganic elements necessary in the diet for normal body functions. So we now know what our fish need to flourish on a proper diet. So let's now take a look at a big reason that a lot of us consider making our own food. If you're like me, I want my fish's colors to pop. I want them to display in the most vivid coloration possible. I want my fish to be all they can. To understand how we can enhance a fish's coloration, we must first understand why they are the color they are in the first place. Now there are 3 of the biggest contributors to a fish's coloration. The first being genetics. Genetics will determine whether a fish has the genetic material necessary to show a certain color. Second is diet. Now, some of the food that a fish eats can directly or indirectly influence a fish's color. Finally, there's environment. The last thing that will affect coloration is the fish's mood and general health. A sick fish will probably be less colorful than a healthy one, obviously. An aquarium with pristine water quality will most likely display fish with vivid coloration than, say, for example, a dirty aquarium. The sex of a fish can also have a huge influence on their coloration, and so can the dominance of a fish. Now obviously the best we can do for genetics and environment is picking a healthy and well-shaped fish and then placing them into a well-balanced and healthy aquarium. We cannot influence a fish to show color that its genetics are not predetermined to, however. If that genetic material is not within the fish, then that color is not going to show in the fish no matter what we do. What we can do is influence the already present colors in the fish with their diet. Now we can do this with all natural and healthy color enhancers. So now that we understand what a fish needs and how they interact with the fish, we can now look at what ingredients we can use that will cover those needs. When considering a source for protein in a fish food, we need to not only consider the values of that source, but we also need to consider its availability as well as its cost. So while there are always better ingredients we can use, there's really no point to doing it if you have always a struggle to find it and it's not affordable to use. Now, beef heart has been a staple in do-it-yourself fish food for a very long time. It's cheap, commonly available, and has a high protein content. The downside is that it comes from a mammal. Now, due to this, its fat has a high melting point. Now, this means that fish cannot actually metabolize that mammal fat. So it actually gets stored in the fish's organs, causing health problems down the road. So we need to remember, if we're going to use beef heart, we need to remove all fat and anything that is not meat as much as possible. Beef heart is still a good ingredient though, due to its high protein content and low fat content. Fish also readily accept it. Beef heart is actually about 18% protein. Now what that means is for every 100 grams of beef heart, there's about 18 grams of protein. Beef heart is also high in iron. Now iron is a mineral needed to carry oxygen from the gills of the fish throughout the rest of the fish's body. Iron also helps the fish's muscles store and use oxygen. Beef heart is actually also high in vitamin B. Now vitamin B, all vitamin Bs, help to convert food into energy. Another source of protein that I like to use is fish fillet. Now fish fillet is simply just the flesh of a fish. This ingredient is more consistent with what a fish would actually come into contact with in the wild for their diet. Adding fish to the diet is actually a wise choice, but with so many different types and species of fish available at your supermarket, which one should you be using? Well, we want to stay away from oily fish because they pollute the water too much. My favorite fish to use is tilapia. It's commonly available and usually the cheapest as well. Now fish actually costs more per pound than beef heart though. Now tilapia is 25% protein and very low in fat. Tilapia is not only very high in protein, but also relatively high in omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. They are essential for the overall health of the fish with many benefits. Tilapia is also a good source of phosphorus and potassium, both essential minerals. These minerals regulate osmotic balance and help with bone formation and strength. Now market shrimp is also a good source of protein and a good fish food ingredient. It is commonly available but not very cheap, but that will depend on the season that you're buying it in. Now fish will also take to it very nicely as well. We'll want to make sure that we buy it in either frozen or raw. We do not want to buy it in cooked. Shrimp contains 20% protein and half the fat of beef heart. It is also an excellent source of both potassium and some calcium. Egg yolk is actually another good ingredient, not only due to its content, but its ability to help bind all of the ingredients together. Egg yolk is actually 16% protein and is very high in vitamins and minerals, like vitamin B12. However, we don't want to use too many egg yolks due to the downside of it, which is it's actually high in fat. So ultimately, we're not going to use it as a main ingredient. We're just going to use it for its protein content, but mainly due to its binding ability. Now, because we're only going to use so little of it, we're not really going to consider its other nutritional values. Now, these are my 4 favorite sources of meat. While there are many other choices, these will give you a basic idea. Now, carbohydrates are stored as a glycogen that can be used to satisfy energy demands in fish. Fish food high in carbohydrates is generally being used as a filler, giving the food more volume and getting more out of your mix. However, the only fillers that I would consider adding to a fish food is something like oats or wheat germ. Now, these are both very high in carbohydrates. However, they're also pretty high in protein. For example, oats are approximately 66% carbohydrates with 17% protein. However, I find that fish are not very fond of it, nor do you really need to use it given the fact that we're going to be making an awful lot of food. I like to make sure that my do-it-yourself fish food is as high of quality as possible with no extra fillers and nothing that's not necessary. Now, good sources of fat have already been listed in our protein content, which would be the tilapia and shrimp. So we don't really have to worry about adding any extra fats. When it comes to vitamins, we can group them into 2 groups, both water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins. When it comes to vitamins, the foods we've listed already in terms of the protein ones already have some vitamins in them. However, we're going to also be using vegetable matter, which have a ton of vitamins in them. Now, out of all the foods that we're going to be using, vitamins are going to be present in a variety and quantity enough to sustain any fish. Now when it comes to vegetables, my 4 favorite vegetables to use are green peas, spirulina, spinach, and romaine lettuce. Now these 4 are going to be jam-packed with both vegetable proteins as well as vitamins and minerals. I consider these 4 ingredients superfoods and an absolute must in any do-it-yourself fish food. If you have to pick just one, it's going to have to be spirulina. It's extremely high in protein with at least 60% vegetable protein and very high in many minerals and vitamins. Peas are going to play a close second. Now minerals are already going to be present in the food listed that we have already talked about. However, fish actually have the ability to absorb minerals through the water with their gills as well as their skin. So this will make up for any lack of minerals in their diets. This is just another reason why water changes are so important, as it constantly replenishes the minerals that fish are using in the water. When it comes to color enhancers, the substance that influence the fish coloration the most is called carotenoids. Now, carotenoids are actually a compound produced by plants, algae, and some fungi. Almost all fish do not produce carotenoids on their own, so they need to get it from somewhere in order to show their coloration. They will do this by getting it from whatever they eat. Let's take a look at a classic example of how a diet can influence color. A basic market shrimp. When you cook them, they turn pink, or when you catch them fresh, they're pink, etc. They are pink. But why are they pink? Well, shrimp eat algae and bacteria. That algae and bacteria that they eat contains something called astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is a carotenoid. Now, the shrimp consume those bacteria and algae, and that is what turns that shrimp pink. Now, let's take a look at a flamingo. What turns them pink? Well, their main diet in the wild is actually shrimp. The astaxanthin present in the shrimp from eating those algae and bacteria are then ingested in by the flamingo, in turn turning the flamingo's feathers pink. So what if we wanted to turn our fish pink, or pinker, or even redder? Should we just feed them shrimp? Well, you could, but you'd have to feed an awful lot of shrimp to them, and the difference would barely be noticeable. Or would it make more sense to just jump right to the source, astaxanthin? Now obviously, as pre-mentioned, the fish or whatever animal you're trying to influence the color of has to be predispositioned to that color within their genetics. So if carotenoids are primarily responsible for influencing a fish's color, shouldn't we just add them directly to the mix? Yes. So let's take a look at the carotenoids that are responsible for influencing the main fish colors. For red and pink, astaxanthin is probably the most widely used carotenoid in fish food. Get your closest can of fish food, turn it over, look at the back, I bet it's going to be listed there. Astaxanthin is widely regarded as the king of carotenoids due to its potency. As pre-mentioned, it's actually produced by marine algae and bacteria. And you can actually get it at a lot of health food stores in the form of a powder. Now, astaxanthin powder is not just a great color enhancer, or, in my opinion, the best you could probably use, but it's also a great antioxidant. When it comes to orange coloration, one of the best color enhancers you can actually use is paprika. Now, paprika is just made from a ground dried pepper. Now, paprika is actually high in a carotenoid called beta-carotene. Now, beta-carotene might sound familiar to a lot of you guys because it's actually the reason why carrots are orange. When it comes to yellow coloration, zeaxanthin and lutein are the most widely known yellow carotenoids. Now, these are actually going to be found in less popular fish foods, like maize and yellow bell peppers. It's actually also found in egg yolks. For blue and green coloration, we can use spirulina. Now, although this is not a carotenoid, it's actually been found that it does have an impact on those colors. Now, obviously, we're not going to add all of these ingredients to our fish food. However, it's been found that fish that consume astaxanthin and beta-carotene will intensify their color regardless of what color they are. The fish will still metabolize those carotenoids and use them. So it would be wise to add one of them, if anything else. So now that we know a lot more about the fish ingredients, what they do, and how much to use, we can now look at actually making it. Now, in this example, I'm going to show you how to mix it all together and how to prepare it for your fish food. Now this mix is what I'm using to feed my discus, and I feed over 200 discus with it. I've been feeding it to them exclusively for over 2 years. Now those ingredients alone are really all I really need to add. They cover my proteins, my minerals, my carbohydrates, my fats, and my vitamins. For my color enhancer, I'm going to be adding 2 teaspoons of astaxanthin. For a binder, I'll be using egg yolks. Now this gives me everything that I'm going to need using nothing but fresh ingredients. Since peas are such a superfood, I strongly believe that they belong in any do-it-yourself fish food, regardless of what fish you're feeding. However, they are extremely difficult to peel when you have to peel so many. We can't feed them with the skins on, and peeling them individually would take hours. So what I do is I buy 100% organic baby food peas. Now basically all that is peeled peas and water. Nothing else. The water in the peas helps with the consistency of the food. You can get so many different vegetables this way, and they are just as good, yet already blended. The first thing you're going to want to do is prepare your meats. We'll need to blend them up into a fine puree, so cutting them up into small chunks is going to make them a lot more manageable. When it comes to beef heart, for example, there's so much on the beef heart that you don't want in your fish food. We want to make sure that we not only cut out all the fats, but we also want to cut out everything else that's not meat. When it comes to beef heart, you're going to be really surprised with just how much of that is not meat. There's a lot of fat as well as arteries within the beef heart. You'll want to make sure that you cut it absolutely all of it out. Now having said that, what I suggest doing when purchasing your beef heart is buy twice as much as you think you're going to need. Now you can move on to the shrimp. Now if you purchased your shrimp frozen, what I suggest doing is just floating them in your sink in cold water and letting them thaw slowly. You'll then have to peel off their shells because those shells are not going to mix well into the actual fish food. With the tilapia fillet, it's the same thing. We're going to want to make sure it's thawed out completely before using it. From there, cut them into more manageable chunks. Now since your peas are already in a container and they're already pureed, you don't have to do anything for those. As for your spinach, if using spinach or romaine lettuce, I'm using spinach in this example. What I do is boil some water and I boil the spinach for about 30 seconds. This softens them up enough so that I can blend them a lot easier. Your spirulina is just a powder and it can be mixed in when you're ready. So far everything that I've listed can be purchased at your local supermarket. However, spirulina you can buy it online or you can go to a local health food store and see if they carry it. The same goes for your astaxanthin powder. From here, I like to individually blend the ingredients up. I start off with the beef heart, blending that up, move on to the shrimp, and then the tilapia. I make sure that they're all blended up easily, doing a little bit at a time to make sure that they are thoroughly blended. Once everything is blended up, I add it all to a bowl and mix it together. I then add in my spirulina powder as well as my astaxanthin and my egg yolks. So obviously you're going to need to have a blender for this job. I also like to use an extra hand blender to make sure that once all the ingredients are mixed together, I can go ahead and thoroughly mix it again. So with all of your ingredients now mixed and blended together, they are now ready to be packaged. I like to package them in Ziploc sandwich bags. All I have to do is scoop out approximately 90 grams into each sandwich bag and then flatten them out with some form of a card. Now I say 90 grams because this gives me a nice consistency of about 3mm thickness of the food once it's in the bag. Because of this, it's much easier to manage and feed. What we'll be doing is freezing this food, and once it's frozen, if it's too thick, it's very difficult to snap off and feed to your fish. It also takes a long time to thaw in the water if it's too thick. Once I've bagged all of the food, it's then frozen. When ready to feed, I simply snap off a piece or as much as I need to feed and drop it into the tank. Now because of its unique thickness, it will thaw evenly and quite quickly for your fish to attack. Now how much you should be feeding depends on the fish you keep. However, what I suggest doing, since this food can actually really pollute your water fast, is only feed as much as your fish will consume in about 2 minutes. Obviously your first few attempts are going to be a little rough, however with time you'll know exactly how much food your fish can consume. Once you have a better idea of how much food your fish can consume within a couple of minutes, you can start giving them a little bit more over time and feed as much as they can consume within 3 to 5 minutes. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I definitely want to thank you for watching.